Thank you, everybody that has been joining. My name is Billy, despite what my name says, Team Citizen Lab. No, my name is Billy. I'm an actual person here. I'm the country manager here at Citizen Lab in the US market. And so really excited to kind of join the conversation here today with, Wyatt from the City of Lancaster. We also have, Sarah and Aaron from City of Rexburg, and then also Maureen Tobin from Davenport Institute. And so our conversation is going to revolve around, data and how it can inform in the decision-making process with your communities. And so there's many different data platforms you're going to be hearing from, particular a couple of our clients here from Citizen Lab, but a lot of what you can take today can be used, or some of those best practices can be used despite whatever platform you're using, or even if you're not even using a platform, using that data that you're hopefully incorporating, closing that feedback loop to hopefully strengthen the bond between your communities and help start and facilitate those important conversations. And so I'd love to start with kind of some introductions to, the moderator and the panel, and then I'll start like just a quick introductory poll just to get a sense of where people are coming from today. And so I'll start with, from Maureen from the Davenport Institute, and then we can go to Wyatt and from the City of Lancaster, and then of course to City of Rexburg as well.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Billy. It is wonderful to be here with everyone this morning. Obviously, at the Davenport Institute, we have a passion around public engagement. So any conversations in this realm are important to us, and we're happy to be a part of it. As Billy said, I'm Maureen Tobin, the Executive Director of the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement and Civic Leadership. We are located in the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine University in beautiful Malibu, California, which unfortunately we were just discussing today is very foggy and gray and actually a little cold, at least for California. At the Davenport Institute, we really focus on furthering and supporting the cause of good, authentic public engagement as a requirement for good government. And we work with local governments across the country, both in training and consulting. And over the last several years, we have worked with and trained about 5,000 people in our country, and even a few outside of our country across the world. So we're very delighted to be here today with this panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen. Wyatt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Wyatt Berenger. I'm from the City of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I serve as a communications and policy strategist for the mayor's office. And I've been with the city for about 5 years, and one of my key roles is working on online engagement. And also, when you do engagement, you also do all kinds of engagement too. So I do lots of in-person events and community feedback. And the City of Lancaster is a small city, about 60,000 people in central Pennsylvania. And I'm really excited for the conversations today.
Awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least, City of Rexburg with Aaron and Sarah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Kennett Cromwell. I am the social media strategist for the City of Rexburg. I am here today to talk about citizen engagement, and I'm so excited to be here with Aaron, my constituent, and as the social media strategist, I deal a lot with not just social media, but all of our web platforms for the City of Rexburg. So I kind of oversee our citizen engagement platform and our website and a lot of that. So I'm really excited to be here.
And I'm Aaron Denny. I'm the Economic Development and Community Relations Specialist for the City of Rexburg. And so I help Sarah with a lot of her projects and love community engagement. A little bit about Rexburg, Idaho. We're about 40,000 people with a large university. And our tagline is America's Family Community. We don't define the family, but we embrace and champion the family. And a lot of our residents love going up to Yellowstone. We're about an hour and a half from Yellowstone. So that's a little bit about us.
Nice.
Nice, wonderful. So before we begin the discussion today, I'll do a quick little poll just to get a little pulse and a little icebreaker for people that we have in the audience here. So me see if I remember how to launch a poll here on Zoom. All right. Are you able to start the poll now? We have 3 questions here. So where people are joining, where from within the US and also global. So it looks like we have a good mix of people from, the US, West, South, North, East, and also a global audience as well. A lot of local government people here too today. So that's really great to see, but also too within consulting, and nonprofits and other institutions there. And then also too, what type of engagement they're facilitating. Great to see a hybrid. So a lot of people are doing both online and offline, but also some people that are just starting out. So it's a great way to see like an introductory to to community engagement as well. And so I'll hand this now over to Maureen to kind of to start the discussion. And thank you so much for participating in the poll. Great to see everybody, and welcome to the discussion today.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Billy. And there's the poll results showing up. Awesome.
Mary.
Okay. So, data and public engagement. Data is such a key part of this from both sides of it. Honestly, I think, we have a lot of data on the local government side that we often need to share in a way that makes sense to our constituents, to our communities, to the people that we're looking to provide input or be part of the decision-making. And at the same time, that input is actually data that we need to be able to collect in a way that's meaningful, and that then we can turn into information that we can share with the decision makers. And so it's obviously a key part of this conversation on engagement. And so I'm going to throw this out to all of you, and maybe we can start with Wyatt. From a very broad top level, what types of engagement data from your perspective do you think are most important for local government decision making?
Yeah, and I think about this question, and I think the most important kind of data we can get is data that is representative. I know that's not necessarily a specific type, but I feel like it's a category, and making sure that we have data from all of our neighborhoods that represent different factions of our community. I think that's the most impactful. I think we are now at a space where we're doing our engagement work, where we're trying to do more quality over quantity work. So if we can know where the data is coming from and that it's representative of our community, I feel like that's kind of our leading goal right now with collecting data. So information that's tied to demographic info is really important to us, which is sometimes easier online than offline. Yeah, I'd say that representative data.
Yeah, representative data. Isn't that truly what we're all looking for? And how much easier tools and platforms like Citizen Lab make all of that, right? Whatever tool you might have out there. And if you don't have a tool, I'm sure many of us on this call have done this manually before, right? And trying to figure out how to pull it all together in a meaningful way. Erin and Sarah, how would you answer that question?
I think we certainly agree with Wyatt that having relevant data is absolutely key, but I think it's also key to have real-time data. So you want to have data that is happening now and current, and not necessarily relying on data from 20 years ago or in the past.
Yeah.
If I was to add anything, I don't know. I remember when I was in university, we learned about Miles' law, where you stand depends on where you sit. And so I think a big key to gathering data is to remember that our positioning might affect what we think. And so it's important to broaden our perspective and get that data from the community, so that we can understand, where they might stand depending on their place in the community as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that concept of current data, timely data, real-time data, so important. And I think we certainly probably all have seen in our communities, you know, particularly after these last few years, relying on data that happened that was from pre-pandemic is not particularly relevant anymore. It's interesting to look at, but so many things have changed since then. Would you all agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see nodding. Okay. So in relation to the things that you've just said, do you think, based upon how you answered relevant data, timely data, do you think that's what helps governments really understand the needs of their constituents, the opinions, or is there something even deeper? And maybe not. Sarah, what do you think about that?
I think that absolutely it's necessary for how we understand and analyze our data. I think that you can really look at like the legal needs versus the public lifestyle needs. So you think about, we had a trails project. So we have trails that run through our community. We're in Idaho, it's very outdoorsy. People want to bring the outdoors into the community. They want accessibility to that. And our legal representation doesn't necessarily see eye to eye with that, but our data is showing that this is what people want. So we need to meet the needs of the people and meet the needs of our constituents in that way.
Wyatt, anything to add to that?
I think the kind of the most meaningful data, while there's an amazing benefit you can get from an online tool, like the most important way is just getting out and having conversations and then being able to track that. I think, like I mentioned in my last one, in-person engagement, often it's hard to tell exactly where people are coming from, or if you have to have a bit of a conversation to tell if they live in the neighborhood, or of course you can make assumptions about their background, but like you want to be very careful with those kind of assumptions. So getting representative is a little harder, but I think nothing beats a quality conversation. And we're about to embark on Neighborhood Month here in Lancaster, which means we have a like little town hall block party mix in every neighborhood. So we try to mirror some of what we're doing online with in-person stuff at those kind of events.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's data is so key and important. And I think ultimately the best decisions are going to be made when you are able to collect good data. And, you know, in terms of engagement, we could say data, AKA input, citizen resident input. At the same time that the soft part of engagement, the getting out there and developing those relationships is all a part of it. And going a little off script here, I hope you all don't mind, but how do you think, you know, as we develop those relationships, which at the Davenport Institute, we would always say is so important. I just read an article before I jumped on here, and it was called Engagement is Not a One-Night Stand. And I hope that's not offensive to anybody, but it isn't. You know, if we think we're just going to go out and do a survey, collect that information, and then that's in public engagement, you know, that's one piece of it. It's those long-term relationships that we develop with our communities. Do you think that affects the kind of data we're able to collect? What do you think? Wyatt, do you want to jump in, or Aaron, you didn't respond on the last one? Are we going to be able to collect? Go ahead.
I'd say that you get a lot more like authentic and genuine data when you build a relationship. And I think one of the things is we have our online platforms called Engage Lancaster. And now that it has some sort of name recognition and people know to look for projects there, I feel like we get a lot better feedback because people are seeking out that space to use and give feedback. So once you build that relationship and some awareness of what you're doing, and people can kind of see patterns of like, okay, here's this project happening in my neighborhood. I know to look for this project. I know to look for the event they're going to host in my neighborhood. I know they're going to do it. I feel like we built that rapport, and I feel like that leads to a lot better input and a lot more people showing up. And if they can't show up, they can do something online.
Sure. Yeah. Aaron or Sarah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what Aaron is doing in Lancaster is what Rexburg is talking about implementing in here in our community. We're talking about having neighborhood block parties, and a big piece of that is bringing department heads and representatives from our government out to the communities to kind of meet with people face to face and discuss issues that matter to the people. But one of the challenges that we face is, how do we know what matters to the people? How do we know what issues to address when we're talking to them one-on-one?
Yeah. Yeah. So you really have to marry the two, the data and, kind of the technological side of things and the soft people skill things where we develop those relationships. And I would definitely agree with you that we probably are able to collect better data if we have developed good relationships in the community. To just go out and do surveys and ask for input without the relationship isn't quite the same. All righty. So how do governments collect and analyze data in an effective manner so that it really can inform decision-making?
I think there are a lot of ways that you can collect data. And for us, what's worked for us is to find a tool that works for you. I think there's, like we've talked about, there's no one way to collect data. You have to collect it in multiple formats and multiple ways. And the tool we found is with Citizen Lab. Our platform is called Engage Rexburg. It works great for us. It's relatively new. So we're still in the beginning processes of seeing what exactly that looks like. We have a committee set up that's only going to meet for the first time next week to kind of focus on the overall data of the whole platform, not just specific projects, but the whole platform, and look at where it's at and analyze, is this successful and what's the best way to move forward.
Okay.
I'd say best ways to collect data, I think, is varied. So like make sure you have variety in how you're engaging people. Because I feel like a lot of people know about like survey fatigue, or like if you ask people to fill out 10 surveys in within a short period of time, they're going to feel like their input is going nowhere. So I feel like creating activities, including visuals, like doing prioritization exercises have been big for us. And trying to tie these engagement projects to some of the physical things they can see in their community that can change. So like what kind of fixtures are going to be on a street improvement project, having the neighbors weigh in, and then getting to see that in their community. I think one of the big challenges is that it might happen in 2 years when that project actually is implemented. So that's kind of a little bit of a relationship breakdown and a communication challenge to keep people feel like that exercise they did 2 years ago is now really impacting this change. I think getting people to understand that is definitely a challenge. And I think analyzing it goes back to when you're doing in-person and online engagement, you're going to get different kinds of data online. People, for our platform, you can fill out a profile, and there's some optional questions. They can say what neighborhood they're from. They can give input on their ethnic and race background. In person, you don't get that kind of same thing. You can be intentional about where you're showing up, meeting people where they are. But then when we go to analyze that data, all those things kind of are important, and you have to show the kind of difference between, yes, we have this great data from our online platform. We have this kind of messy data from our in-person engagement, but here's how we know, like, we met people where they are. So presenting that to kind of decision makers, I feel like has been a bit of a challenge to figure out the right messaging. But I think we've done a pretty good job over time learning how to do it best.
Yeah, that is an interesting challenge, and I'm just curious, have either of your cities, when you're out in doing the face-to-face work, have you, like I know in some places people take iPads and things out to actually, so they can actually input information as they're doing the face-to-face. Have any of you done that in your cities to try and maybe make the in-person face-to-face match up a little bit better with what you get if it's just solely online?
Yeah, we have tried that. We've gone canvassing for, I'm thinking of one neighborhood project where we were going to be redoing a park and putting in a new playground. And local kids actually helped design the potential playground equipment.
That's fun.
And then we went around with options and an iPad and like knocked on people's doors. But it was definitely a challenge to get people to like register. You're knocking on my door. What do you want from me? Let me, well, you're holding an iPad. How do I fill out all of these things? You know, I think the simpler, we got to make it simpler where we're just choosing between two options. And I think that worked. But once you kind of present them with a lot of information, or they really have to sit there and like fill something out, you kind of lose that interest and you lose like the interaction. So I think when you're using technology out in the community, you have to make it quick and easy to use. Otherwise, you just lose people.
Yeah. What about in Rexburg? Have you guys done that at all?
In Rexburg, the closest we've done, I think Aaron can correct me if I'm wrong, because he's been familiar with the city a little longer than I have, but is taking our Engage Rexburg platform flyers around to in-person events with a QR code. So we ask people to fill out surveys with easy accessibility from there. And we don't have iPads that we take around to people in events. But I love that idea.
Yeah, I do think it's still challenging though. And yet both are so important. Both are so important. We talked a little bit about this a couple of questions ago, but how do we ensure that the data we're collecting, whichever way we're collecting it, but let's say specifically online, is actually representative of the community and not representative of the vocal minority? Because even in surveys and collecting information online, how do we ensure that?
I could speak to that
Yeah,
briefly.
Aaron.
So one thing, and I think this goes back to Wyatt's point a little bit, but one thing that we've noticed that helps reach a broader audience and be more representative of the community, if you can't do like a statistical type survey, is make the process to engage a little bit faster. And so we had a project we were working on and doing like placemaking for the community, trying to figure out what people want in the community that's missing. And we did two forms of a simple survey. Well, we did one thing that was kind of like ideation. People could just like post ideas and comment and build ideas off of each other. And the other thing we did was just like a prioritization survey and choosing between a couple options. And we had a lot more responses in that second one, a lot more representative of the community, just because we got so many more people involved, I think. Because when we just had the ideation, there were like special interest groups that would jump on and post like a lot of the same ideas. And then when we were able to kind of get it out to more people and we got a lot more responses, we saw a lot more varied and general answers from what we could tell. And so I think people kind of, they want quick engagement. You know, people are busy.
Right.
So to Wyatt's point, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Wyatt?
Yeah, I'll just say to make sure that things are representative, I feel like we've learned over time of how to like adjust our strategies to make sure we reach everyone. And often you'll see like people talk about the digital divide all the time of like people who might not be comfortable doing something online. So once we've done a bunch of these engagement projects, you can tell, and again, people fill out their profile and say, you know, what neighborhood they're from. So we know, okay, the neighborhood, this happens to be the Real Far community, the Northwest neighborhood, always shows up online. They're just always going to fill out surveys. They are some of the loudest voices often at public meetings. Like it's a similar kind of dynamic that plays out over and over again. And once you have the data, you can see it happen and also pitch a different strategy. So we have, maybe we have like tailored our in-person engagement outside of those areas. And we still show up, obviously we do everything. We try to have block parties in every single neighborhood, but like you can tailor your strategy as saying, okay, we know we're not going to hear that much from these neighborhoods online, so we have to show up in person. and show up where people are. So either it's like a event or meeting that's already happening. We've gone to like some senior centers in the neighborhoods. So I feel like that's how you kind of make sure things are more representative. And then I think there's also a real challenge with that because it takes a lot of time and effort and
Yeah.
energy. And I feel like you have to be realistic on certain projects of like, okay, how much time can we commit to being deeply intentional about getting to everyone? So I'd say that's a constant challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. In-person engagement takes more effort and more time and often, more resources in terms of staffing and funding and everything else. And yet it still is so important in addition to what we can do online and digitally. One of the questions that I'm curious about in your cities, I know when I was working in local government, I had a couple different elected officials who would make sure that they talk to me frequently about, well, these people who show up in person at the council meetings with their input, I just feel, like they deserve, they have more credibility and, that I need to consider what they're sharing, more intentionally than maybe something else. How do you respond to that in relation to, especially when we're collecting a lot of data that may be way more representative of the communities we serve than the people who will actually, number one, first show up in person to, a government meeting, and two, beyond that, actually choose to speak? I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of people who would never speak in any type of public forum. So how would you respond to council members and elected officials that are wondering if they shouldn't give more credibility to the input they receive in person versus, what's collected through online platforms?
I think it's important to look at the demographics. So if you're considering, like for us, the people who show up here in Rexburg really are people who show up at city council meetings, and they are very vocal, and usually they're not super happy. But it's important to listen to them, but I think it's also important to gauge the entire community and not just, like you said earlier, the vocal minority.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's both. Like you still have to listen in to respond to those people who come to your meetings. I think often, like we always say this, the same 10 people, and they often show up to a lot of different things. But that's not just to be dismissive of them. I think you still have to respond and take their input seriously. But you can also arm your elected officials, and in my case would be the mayor, with data like, okay, 600 people filled out this exercise and here's what they said. So when it comes to prioritizing things or saying what people are feeling, I feel like giving that information and is really valuable because they can kind of stand there and say, okay, well, this is what we heard from all of these different types of people. And then if people are questioning on them, you could say, oh, well, we heard from this neighborhood, these specific things, which again takes time to prepare. But I think that it can be really useful for elected officials and kind of showing why their decisions are happening or what they're moving forward with and why.
Yeah. I'm just to the audience. I see a couple questions popping in the chat, and I just wanted to let you know we'll make sure to leave time for questions at the end. And so if you do have questions and comments, please feel free to put them into the Q&A, and we'll leave time to speak to them at the end of this conversation. So from your perspectives in your communities, do you think that having a platform like the Citizen Lab platform and the type of data you can collect through that platform, do you think that's helping to promote transparency and accountability in your local government?
Easy answer is yes for us. I absolutely think that any opportunity that the government has to share their processes, so not just what's happening right now, but like the length of the process of the program and how long it's going to take. And like Wyatt mentioned earlier, talking about something might not be implemented for multiple years. So it's a long-term project. People get really excited about it, but they want to see it right now. We have a parks project that we just asked input on the platform recently, and people were so excited about it. We got over 1,000 responses, and they're like, "Is it coming this summer?" We're like, it takes time to build a park, and it takes time to do all it. So any opportunity to be transparent and share all of the entire process, no matter what level of government it is, I think that absolutely builds trust and helps with the relationship building with the community. Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah. Did you want to comment on that, Wyatt or Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I think Citizen Lab has in their projects, you can develop phases, which is kind of like how you get to see what step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So we've had projects that are multiple years, and then before we've had the platform for probably about 3 years now.
Okay.
But even ones that went back further, we went and put the phases on of like what we did, so you could still go back in
Okay,
time.
so you actually went back and
Yeah, because I think a
okay.
lot of people are like, well, why is this happening in my neighborhood?
Right.
So we want to say, okay, we did engagement in this. It looked a little different back then, but we did engagement in the summer of, whatever year. And here's what people said. Again, I don't want to like give the impression that we do that on every single thing where we're perfect on all of them, but that's when, for those kind of projects that are multi-year and really impactful, we want to like show the progression.
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's
such an
really
important
big.
point. Yes, because you're absolutely right. So many of our projects and initiative and things that we really do need the public to weigh in on, and oftentimes, the input that we've collected, the data we've collected, really has impacted a project or influenced the ultimate outcome, and yet it's several years down the road, and that. How do you keep people continuing to understand that the project is ongoing, the input they provided, did help inform what's happening, and yes, a platform that allows for phases, and kind of drawing that out from the beginning, that we're in this phase, but there's this phase, this phase, this phase. I think really makes a difference. So that's good. Do any of you remember, or were you in these cities or other cities or pre having a platform like Citizen Lab, and what that was like, and how this maybe has changed, hopefully for the better, I would assume, that ability for both transparency, keeping people engaged over, the long term of a project. Aaron's shaking his head. Do you want to jump in on that one, Aaron?
Sure, yeah. So I mean, in my experience in government, one of the biggest challenges I've faced in helping a community is figuring out how to get information out to the community. It's like only so many people use social media, only so many people come to city council meetings, and so many people read the sign at the end of our main street. And so it's like something we've really grappled with. And so we're still ongoing in developing an overall strategy, but using our engagement software, I mean, we use Citizen Lab, it has allowed people to kind of have continued access to information, and we've only had the platform for about 6 months, but the 500 people that have signed up so far, they are just way more in the loop, and they're able to provide feedback. And with our parks project, we got a bunch of information, and we actually adjusted the design, and so we're going to push that back out to them and say, here's the changes we made from what you guys wanted. We're not putting horseshoe things there anymore. We're adding bigger beach area along the river, and then explaining, it's going to be a couple of years down the road till this is done, but like, yeah, it's hard to get information out, and having the platform now has made a significant difference, at least in our community. and being able to communicate with the residents.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you had any pushback on having to create a profile and provide, their personal information to be a part of the platform? And I asked because years ago, well, not that many years ago, but several years back, in a city I worked for, we tried out a platform. Actually, we were kind of doing a pilot for them, and we got huge pushback from our community. It was also a rather tenuous moment in the history of our community, but that was challenging. And it kind of goes to my next question about, how do we protect that data? Are there questions, legal or ethical, that need to be considered when we're having people create profiles and then, share their thoughts? I mean, we're really starting to develop kind of an in-depth profile on someone and how they think and what their desire in their community and what they don't like. How do you respond to that?
I think in our community, we've been fortunate. We haven't had any pushback.
Awesome. And I think it
so-
depends on the community.
Yeah,
What part of the country you are in.
I'm sure it probably does. But I think that part of what makes it important, particularly with ethical and legal discussions, is, again, going back to transparency and talking about on our platform, we kind of explain why we have you answer those questions. So we use that data to kind of narrow down, like Citizen Lab will allow you to put in a project based off of a specific neighborhood or that sort of data. So you can use the data to kind of target certain demographics to get the specific data that you're looking for those people. And I think that's really, really helpful. And that's a tool that we haven't reached yet with our newness to the platform, but I think that's really important. And talk a little bit more about data and using data in an ethical and legal source, as a government entity, we have to remain a non-biased source. So our goal with data is to always reach as many people as possible and talk to as many people as possible and hear from as many people as possible. So like one example of that, we had a recreation center and a rec district project that's going to go out to ballot. But we performed a survey to see if people were just even interested in whether or not we wanted to push this out to the community. And now we're taking a total step back. Now we're like, okay, this is up to you as the community members to tell us whether or not you want this. And if you want it, then you need to petition for it and put it on the ballot. And we're hands off at this point. So again, just remaining a non-biased source in that project and no longer playing a role in trying to persuade people. Yes, we aren't pushing for this recreation center. It's entirely up to the public. It's going to be on the ballot, whether or not you want it.
Yeah, such an important point, because in good public engagement, we're not trying to convince our communities that this is the best thing. We're trying to make sure they have enough information so that they can make those decisions. But sometimes you need a lot of information and data from us just to really understand, enough to make good decisions or provide good input, right? Yeah. Wyatt,
I just want to add that also the lights just went off in my room. So
I saw that. We're glad you're back in the light.
Yeah. We've definitely had some pushback on the creating the profile. I wouldn't say that much significant pushback, but we do try to explain, why we're trying to do that. And most people are pretty on board with that once they hear the reason. But we also have certain questions when you create your profile that are optional. So people can opt into them. Of course, that does sometimes mess with the data you have. But I think most people have, even with the optional questions, those who are creating the profile have filled out the information. And then I think it's about having multiple avenues to engage. Like you can always come to a public meeting, or you can show up at this event we're having, or a public meeting we're having about that project in your neighborhood. So there's multiple avenues to get engaged. So say you're not comfortable with putting the information on there, you don't necessarily have to. You can show up in a different way. Or you could, we put like staff email contacts on for some are more comfortable with that than others, but you can reach out to that person directly if you really want to have like a conversation. Obviously, probably in bigger cities, that might be a little bit more of a challenge, but we have some staff members who are super committed to talking to neighbors and giving them the information. Even if they don't agree, they can at least empower them with information about the project.
Sure, sure. Are you seeing certain segments of your community that are more resistant to signing up and creating profiles than others? Or are you not really sure?
I don't think so. I feel like I think younger people often are more willing to jump on the platform and get involved. But we've had people from all ages also join, but I feel like the willingness and also ease with technology, I feel like they jump on it more quickly.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. That's
yeah.
the whole way of life. Probably there's ages that have never known any other way, you know.
Yeah, but I think most of it has just been healthy skepticism. And I don't think it has really come from any certain demographic or anything like that. And most people are pretty on board once you either explain why or give them another avenue to give feedback. We haven't had that much tension.
Yeah. Do either of you have other languages in your communities, either cities, that create that challenge of language? And do you offer any way to provide input online in a different language?
Yes, we do all of our projects in English and Spanish. We have a 40% Hispanic speaking population. And I think the last time I looked at this information, I think 11% is the metric that speaks Spanish at their home. So we try to have English and Spanish. I would say we've had challenges getting this. We've done all of these activities in Spanish, and I don't think we've really had many people complete them in Spanish. And again, we adjust our strategy for that. So like even we're presenting as an option, it hasn't been really taken advantage of in the way that we want to. But we've also adjusted our strategies to go to Spanish speaking events and bring interpreters. We've been really growing and leading into this area, and we have a big refugee population too. So occasionally for big projects, we'll try to go and invite, we have a big Swahili speaking community and invite them to do a specific session with interpreters. And I feel like that has been really meaningful and probably not done before in our community. So we're trying to build those practices in and invite people in. And again, all those things take resources. So we don't really have the opportunity or means to do it for every single thing, but for the big projects where we're like, okay, we want to reach everyone. How can we tap into our community and our partners and try to get people to show up and also put some funding behind interpreters and yeah, making sure we hire bilingual staff. It's all been a multi-year process.
Yeah. Yeah. Erin and Sarah, you're both nodding through this. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think those are all really great points. Rexburg is predominantly English-speaking white community, but we do have a fair amount of Hispanic-speaking people here. And also with the university, it attracts a lot of international students. So we don't, I think the biggest thing that we do to accommodate that is bilingual staff, but we don't rely on any technology for translating.
Okay. I see Billy's jumped back on or turned his video back on, but real quick, I'm going to ask you one last question to kind of maybe summarize your experience or your sense of data and public engagement. And then we'll go to questions. So each one of you can answer this. To kind of summarize our conversation, obviously data is an important piece of public engagement, and having a platform that can help you better collect the data, better than aggregate the data, visualize the data, present the data to decision makers seems like a really important piece of it. How would each of you in your own words summarize the benefit of having a platform that can help you with that, and overall how it impacts public engagement? Does that question land with all of you all right?
I think for me, it's that the data is tangible. So it's not necessarily hypothetical or he said, she said, it's actual factual data that I can build reports based off of it. And I can bring it to our leaders in our community and I can tell them, this is what I'm seeing from the people. This is how we need to respond, or please tell me how we need to respond.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add, there's it's easy to think, you have so much experience in government or policy that it should be this way or that way. And having the data has been helpful in our with our leaders and helping them realize, oh, okay, my assumptions weren't correct. And I think you can use the data to challenge your own assumptions. It can go a long way for a community and maybe help steer the ship a little bit better.
Awesome. Wyatt.
I'd say the biggest benefit of having this online platform is two things. It makes the collection of information and data a lot more accessible. And it's often a lot faster, which we're talking about in a few different ways. And you also have a place to post responses in like a one kind of collection of that people know to go to see. So we've like made a lot of our survey results completely public, and we take out the name and who, that kind of stuff, but post the content of what people said. And that I think creates a lot of trust, and you can go back and see. It also makes our city staff really think about what they're doing next, which I think is important. And I'd say the other thing is that time. We talked about in-person engagement being really takes a lot of staff time and energy to plan things and get out in the community, whereas creating these online projects is definitely work, and you have to be intentional about how you're creating them, but you can spend some time doing it and then it's up there. You still have to edit it and go back to it, but like the staff hours you're putting into creating an online project often pales in comparison to what it takes to go out into the community and collect a lot of information in person. So I feel like mirroring the two is really important, but you get a lot of output for your input with the online engagement, and that's been big for us.
Perfect. Billy, should I turn it back over to you for mining all the questions?
No, thank you so much. Wyatt, Aaron, and Sarah, and Maureen. This was really really great, and really interesting just to hear the different perspectives and what you've done in your prospective communities. Please everyone feel free to put a clap emoji, thumbs up. You guys did a really great job, and so thank you so much too for for joining today. We had a lot of questions within the crowd, so I think we'll be able to get to pretty much most of them or all of them. But we have one from Nick. Said, hi, thank you for organizing this. How do you control for race and socioeconomics when low-income populations often exhibit lower participation rates? And I'm happy to throw it to to Wyatt, Aaron, and Sarah, but also to Maureen. Feel free as well. Would love to hear your input as well. I don't know who would want to go first.
I just say it's simply showing like we use data to inform our strategies, so we know what the makeups of our neighborhoods are like. We know these different, you look at census data to figure out and understand your city. And I think you show up where people are. And I feel like that's the biggest way. And like I said earlier, when you do these things in iterations and you track them and you share all that information between departments, which I know is it was a challenge for us a while ago, but now we've had those relationships built where we're sharing all this kinds of information. You get to build off of that past engagement to inform your new strategies. And I feel like that's how you know who to reach and how to reach them. And that evolves over time, but I feel like that's the level of intention that we need to put into it to really make sure we're reaching people of all incomes and all backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could jump in on that as well. So I know Wyatt and just the general discussion we're talking about in-person events, like using Citizen Lab, we're one of our options is saying whether or not you're a student, right? And roughly about half of our population is made up of the students on campus. And there's kind of a divide almost between the rest of the community and the city and the students. And on the platform, what we noticed is there's very few students on there. And so right now we're developing a strategy to figure out how to engage with them more in person. So maybe they do start using the platform. And so I don't know, just using the tool helps us kind of see where we're at in terms of the different demographics and being able to, okay, how do we adjust? How do we re-engage? That's just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, I think that whether you have, a platform like Citizen Lab or some other one or technology that makes everything more effective, it is still always a challenge to reach the hard to reach people, whether that's because of race, socioeconomics, demographic, whatever. And I think that continues to be an area that we all have to really consider and think about. And I know in a community that I worked in, we also had a high Latino population and very, very hesitant to provide any data about themselves because of huge immigration issues and a fear that anything connected to the government would somehow translate to the possibility of, if they possibly, were in our community and country illegally, or if they had family members or just friends, they didn't want that connection. And so those type of issues and different issues exist in different communities. So I think we've got to continue to look at how do we get around that, because sometimes we irregardless of that status, they're parts of our community, and we somehow need to factor that in. So that's a good question that I think is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, it's not easy, and it's not going to be a flip of a switch, whether it's different platforms and and of course too, within the work on the grounds and especially to engaging historically disenfranchised or not involved in the engagement process, like you mentioned, Wyatt, as far as like not having a lot of responses in Spanish, right? But at least having that that information there, right, I think is still like a step in the right direction. We have one from Ryan, but I think that kind of it follows within the same realm of like, what are the typical audience size populations that you most struggle to hear from the most? Have you seen any improvement, as far as within, both, I guess, online and offline between, the struggle of or increasing participation rates? Wyatt, I don't know if you have anything on that as far as like maybe some strategies that you have done to involve more of the community.
Yeah. So one of the things beyond like going out and meeting people where they are, which I think has been our most successful thing, and come with the resources, come with interpreters or Spanish speaking staff, or depending on whatever, know the audience you're about to go interact with. I think online we've had success in saying like, we want to hear from this neighborhood, and we'll go out and post in their specific neighborhood groups, Facebook or Nextdoor or any kind of group, or we'll reach out to partners in that neighborhood and send them the surveys and say like, we really want to hear from you all. Can you help us, spread the word? I think that's been really successful. Again, that all takes, checking your survey responses, seeing where you're getting, knowing there's a gap, and then doing something about it. So leaning on partners and getting out in those like specific groups. And it takes some time too to get trust. You can post in a group, or even getting access to some of the groups has taken some time and like relationship building. So I think we've had some success in that area in building up capacity, and also getting some champions in the neighborhood, which we call our neighborhood leaders. And we kind of lean on them in those times too.
Okay, great. And I think another important question from Betsy was related to like a Marine's question about council members giving more credence to those who show up in person. Have any of the panelists dealt with a situation where civic engagement reveals a need or desire for something that elected officials don't really care or can't really support in that instance? And happy to throw it to the City of Rexburg for this one, and to, of course, Wyatt as well. I'm welcome to throw any input.
I was thinking about that question a little bit more, and with our city council, we have a lot of older individuals show up and share. And there's kind of a gap with some of our younger population. Our median age is, I think, 22. So we're a really young community. A lot of people will, after university, stay or get married, start a family here. And we don't have anyone in that kind of demographic on city council. So I think a lot of those people don't feel like they can approach city council meetings. And so just yesterday we were talking about, okay, how do we maybe encourage individuals of that age range to maybe come to city council and share more, so that it's not just the same 10 people showing up and sharing their viewpoints that maybe isn't as representative as some of the younger individuals of our community.
To kind of give like a specific example to that, what we were specifically talking about was a lot of the older community. Rexburg is in the middle of a desert, and it's great farmland out here, and people really want to maintain that farming style community, and they don't necessarily like seeing, so what is it? Rexburg is the fourth smallest micropolitan, or
Fourth fastest growing.
fourth fastest micropolitan city in the country. So
That's growing.
that's for growth. So we're expanding very rapidly, especially post-COVID. And we're finding a lot of younger community members coming into the city. And we're finding a lot of people coming from out of state. But the people who are long-term residents are really looking to preserve the values of what Rexburg was 20 plus years ago. And so they don't want to see developments in the city. They don't want to see apartment complexes. They don't want to see affordable housing necessarily, So how do we get the newer population and the members of the community that need those things to show up and be represented as well?
Wonderful. So I think in the essence of time, we're able to ask one more question. As far as the facilitation, there is one from Anthony. How do you analyze, and this was directed towards Sarah actually, how do you analyze inputs and feedbacks into the Citizen Lab platform? Is there any technical help? How does it really work? Can you talk to any of that experience? And then of course, too, why you have experience in that as well. Happy to open that up to the floor.
Yeah, so for analyzing 1,000 input and feedback, it was a task. And we have a committee that is responsible for going through those responses. And what Citizen Lab does is there's a couple different options for their surveys. So you can have a survey directly through Citizen Lab on the platform that you can use their tool, or you can embed a survey from an outside source. For our parks platform, what we did was we embedded a survey from SurveyMonkey, and we've actually used the SurveyMonkey tools to go in and analyze that data. I don't know if you're familiar with that platform or not, but I will say that any help that I've needed Citizen Lab, as far as like, there's been times where it's like, hey, how can I collect comments on an easy in one place? Citizen Lab is always right there with an answer for me. So yes, there's technical help.
Well, we're at time. I know there's a couple questions we weren't able to get to, but I'll make sure that our team kind of follows up. And we'll be sending some additional information from the Davenport Institute as far as some of those articles and some of some, I guess, the the leading, like for engagement, some of the knowledge articles that they've been able to put out. I highly recommend. I just took their professional certificate for public engagement. It was amazing and really putting out some great stuff. But I really want to thank Wyatt, Aaron, and Sarah, and also Maureen for joining in today's discussion. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Yeah, thanks to Citizen Lab for hosting. This was awesome.
Yeah,
Great
thank
to
you all.
have a
Thanks.
conversation with all of
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone in attendance as well. And we'll be following up with the recording and some additional information there as well. So thank you, everyone. Bye.